do take a seat. Come and sit nearer the front, please, so we're all near each other for this final fireside chat. It was going to be a fireside chat anyway, but I decided that at the end of the afternoon it's going to be more of a grilling. So let's hang in there. My name's Anthony Oliver. I kicked us off. I'm the bookend, I suppose. I'm now doing the bookend at the other end of the session. This is a fireside chat, transforming infrastructure performance, a shared priority. Basically, we're going to try and sort of see if we can lever out some lessons learned or some advice that we can share across the Atlantic and try and see, well, how can we share some experience and expertise and investment ideas to improve infrastructure for Americans and Brits alike. I've got a fantastic panel here. Introduce Gillian Blake. Gillian is Principal for Infrastructure at Arup and is loads of experience across the entire infrastructure portfolio. So thanks for joining us, Gillian. We've also got Alan Godbashian. Alan is Deputy Trade Commissioner for North America from the UK government. So he knows everything about policy. He knows where all the skeletons are hidden and all that kind of thing. And I imagine was personally involved in recent trade deals. Cooperation. Elements of cooperation. Anyway, Alan, welcome. And also we've got David Porter, who is a Director of Engineering at Northern Ireland's Department for Infrastructure, but also the incoming President of the Institution of Civil Engineers, which is the oldest and most celebrated engineering institution in the world. How do I know that? Because I'm a fellow of it. It's fantastic. David, welcome. Welcome to this panel session. To set the scene, we've heard a lot today about the fact that both the US and the UK have got huge, I suppose a huge amount of policy invested in infrastructure investment, a huge amount of aspiration, a huge amount of potential economic growth, which relies on us to really kind of be getting that investment in infrastructure going, helping to deliver more value for people, more for the economy, but also more to protect the planet. I mean, I think we're in an environment now where we've got to shift our thinking, though, away from just building more to actually building smarter. And I think, when you hear the sort of things that Mark Coates has been talking about, this whole idea of using technology, using innovation to think smarter. It's not just anymore about pouring concrete, although we all love a bit of pouring concrete, don't we? Oh, yes. But it's not just about pouring concrete anymore. It's about really unlocking those outcomes. And I spoke earlier, if you were here in the morning, I spoke to the Lieutenant Governor, Miller, about this really strong link between engineering and really serving communities. And I think that's a really interesting point, how we actually unlock that value and get those outcomes. So we get better transport, we get more reliable energy, more affordable housing, and as we just heard, decent water systems, because without water systems, we're going to struggle. So lots to talk about here. I suppose what we're going to really try and get stuck into is what are the shared lessons, where are the gaps? Water maybe highlights where some of the gaps are. The UK water industry, as I was just discussing, it has its challenges, But I suppose I'll be running out? Well, hopefully not. But let's explore those challenges. I've got three areas we're going to get stuck into. First, we're going to look at investment. Then we're going to look at what expertise we can share. And then we're going to look at what experience. And I've asked the panelists to think right at the end about maybe something that they can leave you to leave this summit as you head off and get on with your normal lives, to think about how you can actually transform your infrastructure performance. So I've got lots of questions, but I'm also going to be looking to you. We've got about 30 minutes, so I'm going to put some questions and then I'll come to you guys at the end to get your thoughts as well. So let's start with investment. Gillian, we've heard a lot today about, I suppose, all sorts of different ways we can invest in infrastructure for the future, not just repairing, but rethinking what infrastructure should do. So are we on the right track? Are we doing the right things? Are we trying to invest in the right things as far as you're concerned?
Well, yeah, I think we're starting to get there maybe. I mean, we're talking now about smart infrastructure and leveraging the power of data to get more out of existing infrastructure. So, for example, not widening highways, using data to manage the flows on highways, upgrading signaling systems from fixed block signaling to CBTC. I don't know if any of you saw the New York Times article a couple of weeks ago about the New York City subway signaling system. It's kind of being held together with duct tape and in a lot of love and tender care from some great MTA employees, but it's really overdue for upgrading. And once we upgrade that, we can run more trains on the system and get additional capacity. So using smart infrastructure, smart grids to optimize energy distribution, etc., and just get more out of the assets that we have. Also want to emphasize about the importance of, I'm a train geek, I do trains, I love trains, investing in the US rail infrastructure. I think that's, on the scorecard, it was pretty low, I think, on the scorecard, but, we've seen the investing in rail infrastructure, brings mobility to people, brings economic growth. Last week or 2 weeks ago, the Regional Plan Association issued a report about the Gateway Program, about phase 2 of Gateway Program and the economic benefits that can bring. And had some really great statistics about how many jobs it would create and how much it would generate for the US economy, like $445 billion in economic benefits when we can double the capacity of Trans-Hudson service and allow one-seat rides for many New Jersey residents. So getting those stories out there about the benefit of investing in rail, I think, is critical.
One of the challenges in it is that as engineers, we do naturally gravitate, well, maybe you can challenge me, maybe I'm wrong, but we naturally gravitate to the big build solutions rather than thinking more carefully about maybe adjusting signaling systems or trying to do a bit of tech. Do you think that that's a fair challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think engineers love talking about big projects, but I mean, there's the invisible projects that also need to happen to get us in a better state of good repair. Yeah. Like the air traffic control system in the US, it's definitely desperate need for update, but it's probably not going to be a great ribbon-cutting ceremony when that's finally done. There's no great plaque that can go on the wall, but it's vital infrastructure that has to.
Because when we talk about transport, for instance, the future of transport, we talk about planes, trains, and automobiles. But should we be, for instance, looking at more about bicycles and scooters?
I think that's a triggering word for this administration, I think, at the
It's
moment.
a what?
A triggering word.
It's a triggering word.
Somebody else mentioned.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, fair enough. I'll move on. But David, let's bring you in then. We're talking about investment. We'll come back to the trigger words later on. David, talking about investment, though, I mean, how do you think that, from your experience in working in Northern Ireland, which is an interesting political scenario, maybe you might want to explain a little bit more about that. But, I mean, how do you think we should align these investment decisions with long-term performance outcomes? I'm thinking resilience, I'm thinking reducing carbon, and perhaps even bringing in a bit of equity as well.
I think if you want to make these things real, you need to be thinking about them from the start of the project. They can't be seen as a bolt-on
right.
to do, and a number of speakers reflected that today.
Is the mic on? Do you want me to press your mic on?
Me? Hello. You hear me now?
That's much better,
good. Getting the thumbs up from the back. So not seeing these things as a bolt-on. That's something that we include in the project right from the outset. And I think there's been lots said today about sustainability or resilient. There's been lots said about accessibility. What hasn't been talked much about is carbon. And so maybe I'll use that as the example of how we can better include that within our projects right from the get-go. And the reason why I want to really focus in on that is because within the UK context, we have developed PAS 2080. And PAS 2080, PAS, is the publicly available standard. And 2080 isn't the year that we're going to have it actually done by. Yeah, right. It just happens to be the number that is given to the next PAS. And what PAS 2080 does is provide a framework for the management of carbon in infrastructure and buildings. Mm-hmm. And it gives you a very good framework because it says, think about carbon right from the start, embed it in your processes, baseline, drive it down through the supply chain, and then manage that right through the project. Yeah. And that ethos of thinking about it at the start, managing the carbon through the process, will mean that will be part of your decision making.
Yeah, and when it comes to the investment side of it, the idea there is if you do think about the carbon early enough, then you can actually get reduced cost. That is the ultimate aim of it.
Yeah, and whenever the focus is turned on carbon, very often there's been this glib statement to say, in order to support this, all lower carbon projects, you save money, and that's genuinely not the case, unless you start to think about carbon right from the start.
Yeah.
If it's something that you're going to think about halfway through the project, chances are you'll have missed the opportunity to make those carbon and financial savings.
Yeah.
So driving that into that thought process, to include it in the decision-making process right from the start is so important.
I often think in your particular location in Northern Ireland, you have very, from an infrastructure perspective, you have a very close tie-in with your communities. Because people do notice if the roads don't work, because of, there's not a huge network of roads you've got there, and there's certainly not a huge network of trains either. But people do notice there's quite a small community, and if you get it wrong, it matters.
Absolutely, and actually we met with some ICE members from New York earlier this week, just because I happened to be in town, and as engineers do for entertainment on an evening, we did some maths. And the maths was comparing the road network in New York City with the road network in Northern Ireland. And so for 8 million people, and we compared that with Northern Ireland of 1.9 million people, and 10,000 kilometres of road in New York City against 26,000 kilometres of road in Northern Ireland. So that just gives you a sense of, and then we divided one against the other and worked out that each citizen in New York has just over a metre of road, and each citizen in Northern Ireland has 11 metres of road, and so that gives you a sense of just the different scale of what we're dealing with.
David, at which point we say you need to get out more. Alan, Give us the UK government perspective. And by the way, the UK government is still overseeing what's going on down there on the roads of Northern Ireland. I've just to underline. But no, I mean, how do you think the government, whether it's the UK government or the US government, whether it's federal or state, how can governments work to better de-risk those long-term infrastructure investments that might, in a way that might perhaps attract this vital and necessary private investment?
I think we should just spend the whole session comparing New York City and Northern Ireland. There's endless fun there.
Apparently there's more grass in Northern Ireland.
So I think we've got a relatively new government in the UK, as you know, less than 1 year in. And as you probably also know, the Prime Minister has been very clear from day one that the number one priority of this government is economic growth and long-term investment in infrastructure particularly is something that this government sees as vitally important for delivering significant economic growth. So if you're an investor, you want policy clarity, you want legislative clarity, you want fiscal clarity and stability, preferably, and you also want opportunity. And so when it comes to a long-term infrastructure strategy, this government wants to deliver on all those elements to make it as attractive as possible for private capital. So we're about to launch next month. If this was just a bit later, it would be fantastic. I could have unveiled and given you all the detail. But at the moment, this is just the trailer, the preview. But next month, the government will be announcing a new 10-year infrastructure strategy. And it's very deliberately a decade long because we think long-term commitments and clarity are really important. That will be underpinned by the spending review, which will be announced at the same time, which will set out the budgetary support for that strategy. And we're doing that in long-term chunks. So the first round will clarify how much capital will be spent in support of that strategy for 5 years, and then there'll be incremental 2-year rollovers after that. But it's very much about what can we do to provide stability, clarity for a very long period ahead. So that's on the policy side. On the legislative side, that'll be backed up by legislation like the Infrastructure and Planning Bill, which should provide a lot more clarity on permitting processes, on planning processes, speeding that up, making it much more streamlined. And then all that will be implemented through the new National Infrastructure and Services Transformation Agency, NISTA, which will sit in Treasury and will be kind of jointly run between Treasury and the Cabinet Office, making sure that this is implemented in a way that's central to government. So lots going on.
Lots of different mechanisms there, but I suppose you could say we already have in the UK, which is great, has always been great news, a 5-year planning horizon for the strategic road network. We have 5-year planning horizons across the water sectors, for instance. We have 5-year planning cycles across the rail networks. Why does this new 10-year strategy, why do you think it's going to be so transformational then?
I don't think we've ever had anything this comprehensive. So the infrastructure strategy brings together all the different elements of what you've described. And it also sits within the broader industrial strategy, which is also being launched next month, which is the government's, again, comprehensive, coherent approach to how economic growth is going to be delivered across the spectrum. So we've had it, you're right, but it's been comparatively, relatively piecemeal. This brings it all together.
Yeah, I mean, David, I know that this is something which the bodies like the Institution of Civil Engineers have been calling for quite a long time. Are you genuinely as excited as Alan? This is Alan being excited, by the way.
Absolutely. And actually, it is my own lived experience about the long-term benefit of planning for infrastructure, because I can remember 20-odd years ago, sitting as a young graduate, hearing about how Northern Ireland was going to develop, and in particular how the road network was going to develop, and that was the launch of the Regional Transportation Strategy, and that set out the key transport corridors, the links across the UK, the links into Southern Ireland. And whenever I now look back at my career over the last 20 years, I've built what was in that plan. Now, the plan changed depending on different ministers and their priorities and the availability of money, but actually that framework of this is the vision of where we're going, it gives us certainty.
That plan was being carried forward. Gillian, you've been over in the US working for a couple of decades now. Do you think that this kind of long-term strategic approach is what's missing in the US?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, we're very at the whim of different administrations and their priorities, and having a vision that could be carried forward 10 years would be fantastic.
Is it possible, given that I mean, there is a very strong federal system here, but there's also a very strong state-by-state system. Can this be delivered? Can this kind of 10-year strategy be delivered in the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I learned when I came to the United States was there's nothing united about the United States. I didn't realise how different it was between states. Yes.
Careful. 20 years is not that long to be here,
So yeah, it's definitely challenging with different state and federal, agencies. And
one of the things which the UK arguably has kind of been a proponent of and an early adopter and an exporter of is this concept of private finance initiative and P3. I mean, David, do you think that there are lessons that, given that the actual concept is not actually that well trusted in the UK nowadays, do you think that there are lessons that the UK could be sharing with the US the US states about bringing in private finance?
So the UK's had a bit of a patchy experience with PPP or P3, some good projects and some not so good projects, and in particular the ones that have been highlighted to the public and in the media of how they have failed tends to be in terms of that return of investment. Not that they failed to return on investment, but because there was what is perceived as being an exorbitant return on investment or an unforeseen return on investment. However, I think that in many respects misses the point about PPP. And if you're just focused on the finance bit, if you're using that as a way to buy infrastructure because you don't have the money, you're missing the point. You need to really understand that PPP is an opportunity to have a genuine public-private partnership, that the public brings something to the table, their vision, their desire, their wish to have infrastructure, and the private sector then brings something to the table, and it can't just be money.
Yeah.
It needs to be the skills, the expertise, the digital aspects of projects in order then to make that difference. Because if it's just about money, either we prioritise it and we wait until we can afford it, or we raise taxes or get the money from some other way, as was mentioned in the previous discussion, because that interest rate changes, and at certain times within the infrastructure cycle, it'll be possible for government to borrow that money in order to fund that infrastructure.
That's about getting essentially better outcomes for the same amount of investment effort.
Yeah, and not just focusing on the financial outcomes. It's the delivery of the project, the quality of the people that you get involved in it, the quality of the project that you deliver, and how that has actually managed to address the outcomes that you wanted and the benefits for society.
Yeah, I mean, Alan, is that something which you ever get involved in at the Commission, within your work?
Pretty specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously looking to see how we can partner with industry, partner with private capital is something we're always interested in. And it's really the underlying principle of the National Wealth Fund that we've set up to support the industrial strategy and the implementation of the infrastructure strategy. And that's very much based on the premise of how public funding will partner with private investment. So we've learned lessons. As David said, there's been great things which have come out of P3 and also challenges. So we've learned some lessons from that, and we'll apply that going forward.
Because the reality is, I was interested when Tom produced the report card earlier on, which is a fantastic thing, by the way, from the ASE. I think it's a great way of measuring where you are as a nation. But I suppose what Tom said is that the thing about the ASC is it's a non-political organisation, but when you put that kind of thing up on a screen, it suddenly becomes hugely political. And Sir John Armitt, who used to run the National Infrastructure Commission, his point was that infrastructure and politics is umbilically linked. You can't separate them. David, how do you think that kind of report card, do you think it's helpful, or do you think it's something of a kind of a stick to beat the government with?
Well, it can be both. However, for a professional engineering institution has a very, very important role to speak truth to power. And so having this situation where engineers say, oh, sure, it's all grand and don't worry about it, actually is doing a disservice to our core function, which is to deliver benefit to society. And some of that messaging can be quite difficult for politicians to hear, but we also need to recognise that we need to be careful that we don't just set an impossible task by saying you need all this infrastructure, you need all this money, and just politicians sort that out.
Yeah.
Again, we need to have that grown-up discussion about what is actually possible and where the priorities are.
Because Gillian, we're continually saying we just need another $3.7 trillion. It turns into kind of noise. I mean, how do you get over that?
And absolutely, and I think that we need to be careful as an industry not just to focus on an ever bigger number, because if last year the number was 2 billion and we couldn't do it, how are we going to deliver this year with 3 billion backlog, and then next year it's going to be 4 billion. Well, if we couldn't fix it 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So I think tactically we need to think just about how we express that backlog. We need to be careful that we don't make this problem so huge that the politicians go, well, this is unfixable. And by the way, we've also got problems in our health service. We've also got demands in our education system. So we need to be tactical in the way that we express that.
Yeah, and Gillian, when you look at we're hearing about the water sector in the US, big challenges there. What advice as a professional would you give? Is it about trying to highlight the problem, or trying to go there with more tangible solutions?
I mean, I think it's both. I mean, I think that getting some good sound bites out there about the challenges of not investing in infrastructure. I think the statistic we heard earlier was $2,000 for each family, and if we don't invest, it's $2,700. I mean, those kind of soundbite nuggets that you can put on Fox News or wherever, would be really great to just keep talking about. Apart
from, you've got to avoid people saying they would say that, wouldn't they? It leads us probably onto this issue of expertise. The second issue I want to talk about today was sharing knowledge across borders and sectors. Alan, I'll start with you. We have got a lot of the UK talent. There have been some British voices on the platform today. There is some cross-border cooperation. Is there enough cross-border talent mobility between the UK and the US to tackle these most pressing infrastructure issues?
I think there's a good amount. You only have to walk in New York City to hear the number of British accents around, to know that there are lots of British,
or maybe there's too many then. I don't
professional experts here, but we need more. And this industry is one which is a really great example of needing more, because there are talent gaps, absolutely, just as there are talent gaps in the industry in the UK. So we absolutely want to see more mobility of expertise. That's something that's always sensitive to negotiate. It can be tricky because some of it is the legislative kind of frameworks around it are complicated and there aren't often quick fixes. But the British government is looking to do more on this. So we just published a brand new immigration white paper, which will be making its way through the parliamentary process. And that very expressly sets out a new framework for fast-tracking talent being able to access the UK, streamlining those processes, making sure that experts can get to the UK to practice their professions much more quickly and easily through a number of different mechanisms than they are now. When it comes to the US and the UK, we've seen some really fantastic things happen recently on mutual recognition of professional qualifications. So in 2022, we had the architecture mutual recognition rolled out. And just recently, last year, we had the same for engineering and engineers. So that's not done, as you probably know, at federal level. It's done at state level, although the agreements are done at a higher level. And so for engineering, for example, the majority of US states have signed up to recognize British engineers practicing in the US and vice versa. So we're really excited about that. Yeah. It signals greater openness, it signals greater mobility, faster processes, streamlined processes, and we're already quite pleased with the uptake that we're seeing.
But I mean, just to pick you up on that, it isn't the case, though, that if you are a chartered civil engineer, for instance, you can automatically go and practice in any state in the US. There's still some very specific regulations you've got to pass. I mean, David, how is that mutual recognition rolling out?
So in principle, there's mutual recognition of the qualification, but there is an application process that you have to go through, and that process needs to be robust enough to ensure that nobody can slip through the net.
Right.
But as Alan has said, the process is relatively streamlined to allow people then to have their qualifications recognised.
Yeah. Well, Gillian, how does it work with at Arup? I mean, how does Arup approach business in the UK versus the US? Are you able to bring your global expertise to play over here?
Yes, of course, we are a global company, and our structure and our collaborative nature facilitates skills sharing. For example, we share our profits globally, which helps you make sure you're helping out other people when they ask. I mean, we have these skills networks that work across the globe, and a great example of implementing kind of local knowledge globally is after Superstorm Sandy, my client called me up and said, hey, what do other subway systems around the world do to stop flooding? And I was able to sort of crowdsource a question on our global skills network, and the next day I woke up with a 50-slide PowerPoint presentation that I was able to send to my client that day, telling about lots of other countries and how they sort of tackle this problem. So that's a great example. I think there are barriers, though, to bringing talent from overseas, having overseas talent work on US projects. Obviously, we respect the contracts that our clients give to us, but some of them have restrictions. We can't use overseas staff, and they fall into a number of categories. Firstly, data residency. I'm seeing a lot more requirements for data residency, and some very strict contract requirements, such that you can't even have a Teams call and share stuff on the screen. With some contracts, oh, right. It's very challenging. And then we also have restrictions on overseas staff working on projects in the US. So New Jersey State, for example, has a source disclosure requirement. You can't use overseas staff. Amtrak, in the bipartisan infrastructure law, it specifically notes that you can't use overseas resource on Amtrak projects and Amtrak contracts. And some contracts request staff to have I-9 forms, i.e., got to be legally allowed to work in the US to work on the project. So that prevents us from sometimes using overseas people on projects. But we do get over that with staff mobility. Obviously, I'm here. I arrived here 22 years ago to do Second Avenue Subway because we realized we needed to bring overseas talent to build new subways here in New York. So I was able to move here. But mobility sometimes has its challenges as well. I mean, we're very lucky in being engineers here in the US. They pay us very, very well, which is nice. And but when I went back to the UK and I looked at my salary on a piece of paper, I was like, what? They're paying me what? A lot less. Right. So it's sometimes not very attractive for people to move the other way, I think, from the US to the UK.
Well, Alan, given that the UK government is, its number one mission is growth, I mean, in what ways are you helping businesses like Arup and other businesses like Arup are available. We've heard Stantec and AECOM earlier, Jacobs, etc. How do you help them to boost this cross-Atlantic or transatlantic sharing of talent?
I mean, we try and make it as easy as possible. So it's about removing obstacles where we can. It's about listening, most of all, to industry to find out what the real frustrations are. And again, under this infrastructure strategy, there's a new infrastructure task force that's been set up to encourage an inclusive conversation with everybody about what's working, what's not working. And industry is a really important part of that. So I think really understanding what business needs in terms of mobility requirements, then we can take that and feed that into negotiations. So, we've just come through the economic prosperity deal, mainly dealing with tariffs, but we see that as a precursor to a much wider conversation with the US on business, on trade, on mobility, which can take us a lot further than where we are now. So we want business to feed in, and then that will help inform us in our own negotiations with the US.
Hopefully the US also sees that as the first step as well.
I think so.
Good. Now, David, one of the conversations we had when we'd met some of those young folks from the IC on Tuesday night was they were asking you, can you help speed up that mutual recognition process to help young people come here and work and earn a living as an engineer working here? Is that something which is definitely on the cards for you?
Yeah, and that's the value of me coming to an event like this and having the opportunity to meet with members, because I could sit back in the UK and understand that there's a mutual recognition agreement and think, box ticked, that's that all sorted. But actually to meet with members and hear that there's some little things that we could do to help in that area, and it's something that certainly I would like to engage with Alan and to see how we can actually smooth some of those out for people. Yeah.
Well, just to close out on expertise, you mentioned, Gillian, you mentioned the role of digital and data sharing, etc. I mean, do you think there is a much stronger role, Gillian, for digital and data systems and capabilities to play in boosting that sharing of knowledge? And if so, who's actually, in your mind, should be leading this actual transformation, or digital transformation, that is going to change the way we work?
Yeah, so I mean, in the UK, there is actually a national BIM mandate that was put into play in 2016. It's taken about 10 years, I think, to really sort of get really embedded. But BIM is used in every project. Not even
this is every public sector body above a certain level of value of investment has to use building information modelling as the basis of its information sharing.
Yeah. And everybody's adopted the ISO standard in terms of the way they structure the information, but that's not. There's no national mandate here in the US. I think a lot of people have adopted sort of the AIA standards for sort of building projects, but there's not really anything equivalent I've seen for infrastructure. I think a lot of people have talked about digital twins, and that's great. And I think there's been some very positive developments in the last day or so from the Trump administration with regard to sort of use of aerial drones and beyond visual line of sight operations, which I think is going to transform the way that maybe infrastructure asset operators are able to sort of monitor their assets remotely. So that's really good to see that level of leadership from the federal government. Who should lead it? I mean, I think consultants need to educate clients about all of these great technologies and how success stories from overseas and everywhere else, and encourage clients to sort of adopt this. I was very happy to go to a lunch with Commissioner Tom Foley from the DDC, who said that they've just put points in their contract for innovation. So, consultants are rewarded for bringing innovation to their clients, and they're going to be selected on the basis of the innovation that they're bringing. So that's very positive.
Well, Alan, given that Gillian mentions the BIM mandate, it was a success story in the UK. Is that something which the UK government is doing enough to, I suppose, to try to export over here?
Proud of the heritage that we have of things like BIM. So the conversation on that started in 2011, and as Gillian said, became established in 2016. And having kind of publicly procured contracts be digitalized that way was quite pioneering at the time. So we've got a great legacy on this. So we want to build on that. And again, with this government, they have placed digital and tech at the forefront of their growth strategy. And certainly for the British ambassador in Washington, if you listen to Lord Mandelson, whenever he speaks, the first thing he mentions is doing more with the US on tech. So the US is the biggest tech ecosystem in the world. The UK is the third largest tech ecosystem. There is a lot more we can do together. So when I talk about going beyond the economic prosperity deal that was just signed a couple of weeks ago, it's really about going deeper in areas like tech. And we're hoping to sign very soon a really comprehensive and deep tech partnership with the US that would affect all sectors of collaboration, including this industry.
Right. I mean, and I know the ICE, David, you mentioned the PAS, the public accessible standard, available standard on carbon. I know you're also working on one on collaboration at the moment.
One on productivity and then collaboration and resilient infrastructure as well. Yeah.
And is that something which you're likely to try to export over here as well?
Yeah, these are standards, as their name suggests, that they're publicly available, and so if they're applicable, we would encourage the use of them.
Okay, yeah. Okay, we've got one more issue to talk about here, which is around experience and learning from what works, a bit of experiences, etc. But I'm going to, on those first two issues of investment and expertise, are there any questions that people want to put to this fantastic panel here, just to give you an opportunity to put your thoughts to them while we have time? Yeah, one far away, yeah. There's a microphone coming.
Okay.
I know you can shout. I've heard you.
To my kids, man. Billy Terry from Atkins Realis. I have a question to our brothers and sisters in the UK. I don't know if most folks would agree with me. Here in the States, there's an underlying schism, if you will, particularly in the transportation element of infrastructure, right? That schism, whether it be bicyclists versus drivers, whether it be rail public transport for bus public transport. And I think some of our conversations, we do ourselves disservice because externally we act like it's one mobility. And I think if you look at the trade associations, et cetera, there's this underlying, I can't think of a more technical word, I'm sorry, an ism, if you will. And it plays itself out on many different levels, local, state, federal government, policy shapers, policy makers. So I'm curious, as it relates to the mobility conversations, in the UK, do you find those same push and pulls of advocates of one form of mobility versus the other?
We love a good silo, don't we, David?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. So this, to give you comfort, it's not just happening here, and it's happening in the UK. Indeed, it's happening right across the globe, where there is a tension between different modes. What we need to try and do, I think, is a few things. One is we need to be careful that we don't demonize the car. So there are rural areas that still need to use a car. So in the discussion that we're having about transport, we need to be careful that we don't then alienate a group of people. We equally need to be careful that in making that argument, we don't then allow people who can be using public transport, who can be walking and cycling, to get off the hook by saying, well, I've heard that the car's not demonized, therefore it's okay for me. So people that live in a very dense city with a very good public transport system really should be using that. They should not be trying to use the car. And those people that in rural areas where there isn't a good public transport system, that they need to be facilitated, and we need to allow those people then to do that, because we need to recognise the real value that mobility gives to communities and to individuals in order to carry out their normal lives, for economic activity, for even just social cohesion. So those things we need to be very careful. I think we've been a little bit clumsy as an industry in the way that we are moving towards carbon and emission reduction in some of that messaging. So it's something that we need to be more sophisticated in the way that we communicate that. And I think that will then land with people whenever they understand that actually those that can go on to sustainable transport, or those that can go on to public transport, really should. And that would also then take some of the pressure off our infrastructure systems. If we had 10 or 15 or 20% of the cars off the road here, the system would actually work that bit better. And so it has that win-win in terms of actually allowing the public transport systems to be viable, to move volumes of people, to enable more investment to be put into those. But also it has the added benefit of taking the pressure off the other systems, which are really at creaking point.
I mean, is there a risk, Alan? We heard earlier about the propensity in the UK to invest in systems that naturally gave a more of an economic return. Given that the government's number one mission in the UK is growth, is there a risk that it only invests in transport systems that will deliver that growth? I'm thinking the major high-speed rail systems or the southeast of the UK transport systems, rather than the much-needed rural bus services.
It's a really important point, and it is a political point. It's a sensitive point, and this is something that is drawn out in the industrial strategy, because it's not the pursuit of growth at all costs. So first of all, we absolutely think that economic growth and aggressive, ambitious economic growth is compatible with clean growth. So sustainability absolutely runs through it, and they're not mutually exclusive by any means. But yes, completely, there needs to be special consideration for the requirements of rural communities, for example, where you need perhaps a more nuanced approach or a different approach. So it absolutely can't be monolithic, one size fits all.
Okay. There's a question down here. Daniel's running.
Just going back to the BIM mandate for a second. I'm Bentley's lobbyist, and so I use the BIM mandate all the time in my conversations with policymakers, with Democrats, perhaps less so with Republicans, but I use it all the time. And so I'm wondering about the implementation of that and how that went, particularly in the beginning, because one of the pushbacks that I've received is that mandate is great for those that can invest in that. So it's great for the larger contractors. It's great for New York City. It's great for the Texas DOT, which has a $50 billion a year budget. What about the smaller guys, right? If everybody is subject to that mandate. Now, I think there's the policy argument, which is that we should be pushing the envelope, right? We should be trying to get the guys from the left side of the bell curve to the right side of the bell curve. But that doesn't mean that there's not pain points along the way. And that's one of the pushbacks when I try to talk about your success, and I think it really is very much an innovative and small p progressive success. There are these little benchmarks along the way that I think might be a little painful.
Gillian, how do you overcome that? Making sure BIM is not just for the big folks like the Arabs to pioneer.
Yeah, I mean, we work a lot with our minority small businesses on our projects to make sure we're upskilling them, in those major projects that we have, so that they can then deliver, on those other smaller projects and upskill their own staff. So we do invest, some time in helping our minority partners in that space.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the contractor supply chain, the small contractors, it would take a lot to get them sort of up to speed, and I don't have any particular wisdom about it. I don't know if
David?
David does.
I think it's a good question, but it's actually at the heart of it. What the government was trying to do was to drive that innovation, to require a change on public sector contracts, and that came at a price. So whenever somebody was tendering for it, they knew that there was a requirement to have BIM, and therefore that was added in the price. That was a price that government was prepared to pay, because it could see that by requiring this, that would then help the industry move forward in this. So I think that there's a leadership piece by government in requiring that in its contracts, accepting that there comes with a cost, but knowing that there will be long-term benefit for the industry, because that will require that standard, and others, including the small players, will then eventually get there. The other thing about it was that there was early warning about it. It just wasn't announced on a Friday evening and you're required to do it by next Monday. There was time for companies to warm up to this, and then there was a phased implementation in it as well. So it was quite pragmatic the way it was brought forward.
Yeah, and bear in mind also that it came about at a time when the government was absolutely in desperate need to find a way of doing things cheaper. It had to do something pretty radical to make that happen. We've got 4 more minutes. Is there one more question before you've gone far away? Yeah. Oh, there's 2 more questions. I'll do one after the other then. Make them quick.
There is actually a BIM requirement for buildings for the federal government. GSA has had it for at least 15, if not 20 years. Rest of infrastructure, not so much.
Okay. Question behind you?
So I like this, Mike Salvato, infrastructure RE. I really like this line of questioning or strategy of kind of allowing for the transfer and collaboration in this area of knowledge, particularly in digital technologies, but also in carbon transfer and things like that. And I'd like to ask you, and just my understanding of what they did in the BIM level 2, they put this thing called the soft landing, which was really targeted towards supporting the smaller companies so that they could get the capacity necessary to be effective without bearing kind of the training costs or the other type of costs. So this infrastructure, the soft infrastructure was put in place to support the digital infrastructure, to support the physical infrastructure for an effective transformation. And I understand that they saved the government about 15% on all infrastructure projects as a result of this. And so the question I would have would be, what effective institutional to institution relationships can be established to say, put together some sort of task force in this area, such as the Royal Academy and the National Academy, or the ICE and the American Society of Civil Engineers, and what type of action can we take in that?
David, that sounds like it's one for you. It sounds like it's an instruction.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we're very keen for it. So Mark started off the discussion this morning saying how TIP started, and ICE was at the very core of that. And then, as it started to develop across the globe, we were there to help support that. So we're very keen as an institution to be supporting that, because it gives us the opportunity to come and talk to our colleagues from ASCE and others that are in the room. And that network is hugely important. Yeah. Professional engineering institutions across the globe need to be talking to each other, need to be engaging for exactly the reasons of what you're saying. That knowledge sharing, that understanding of mutual qualification, and also then it helps us forms our opinion by being educated, by understanding what others are doing and the challenges. It broadens your perspective.
Yeah, sounds like the sort of thing which the British government would love to support and sponsor underneath the Warhol Committee.
If you don't know, Anthony's referring to a portrait of the Queen done by Andy Warhol in the British residence. Come and see if you haven't seen. You're very welcome. Absolutely, that's exactly what we want to get behind all the time. So it's conversations like this, exchange of expertise. What the British government can do and must do is be a convening platform for these conversations. So the more the better. Okay.
Well, just round us off with one final action. I asked the panel to come up with one final thing that they should going away from this event today, thinking about and ruminating on as they get on the MTA. Gillian, what do you think? What's the one thing they should be ruminating on?
Yeah, this is a tricky question for me, but I just think it's being more mindful of articulating the problem and the outcomes for the end users, and making sure we're telling those stories about the benefits to people and communities, the economic benefits of infrastructure investment, and what end user benefits that brings. So telling good stories. Telling good stories.
David?
Yeah, so the Lieutenant Governor started out this morning by thinking about people using the sidewalks, not just about maintaining the sidewalks, but actually thinking about the people using the system. So I think as engineers and infrastructure professionals, we need to be better at focusing on the purpose, the outcome that we're going to do, not just worried about the concrete, as you say, and we do love pouring concrete, but actually understanding that by pouring that concrete, we're providing infrastructure which improves people's lives.
Right. Just to reinforce that, we like digging holes first and then pouring the concrete. And Alan, final word. What should people leave here thinking about in terms of transforming their infrastructure performance?
So if government's going to get involved, it needs to do it properly. And for us, doing it properly means a long-term strategy, not a flash in the pan, but something people can rely on for years to come. That's better for industry like you, it's better for investors in terms of having clarity on their potential return, and most importantly, it's better for the citizen who stands to gain most out of this, whether that's improved roads, more housing, access to leisure facilities. The citizen, the voter, needs to know what's in it for him or her for the long term.
Brilliant. I mean, and that really does, as you say, it takes us right back to Lieutenant Governor Miller this morning, and that link between public service as a politician and public service as an infrastructure professional. I think that's something which, if you never forget that, No, that's what you're all there for. It's a great thing. Look, thank you very much. Thanks for rounding us off with this fireside chat stroke grilling. Thank you very much to my panel, Alan, to David, and to Gillian. Round of applause for the panel. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys. I'm now going to hand you over to Rory, who's in charge, and he will see us out and let you know what you're doing next. Rory.
You did it. You made it to the end of the day. Give yourselves a round of applause. It was a marathon, but we made it. Look, I think we all learned a lot today. My job here for the next couple of minutes is just try to summarize that quickly so we can all get out of here, maybe do some more networking, maybe grab a couple of drinks and go to dinner. As I was thinking about what I could say, how I could say it, I think the first thing is, stereotypes are outdated, and let's flip them on their head. For too long, we've heard the US infrastructure is outdated, it's aging, we don't innovate. And sure, there is elements of truth to that. But I think the momentum that we've had over the last 4 years, the momentum from the room today shows that we are making progress. We truly are making progress. And I think that's what I'd like to take away from today. Yes, there are challenges, but we are meeting them. My previous job, I led engagement for the G20 Global Infrastructure Hub. I had the pleasure of being able to engage with G20 governments on their infrastructure challenges. And I can tell you, after IIJA, governments from Canada to Europe to Australia to Asia were all really worried about the quality of bidders, the amount of finance that they could get in their country, because everybody was coming to the US to build, design, deliver infrastructure. And I think that that's still true today. This is a really hot market. We have good momentum. Yes, there are headwinds, but let's keep that going. So as I think about how we can build on that momentum, I want to share kind of 3 lessons here. One, we got to start with a vision, and we need to push through the barriers. We're making progress. We saw from Tom at ASCE that US infrastructure is not where we need it to be, but it is improving. We learned from at Duke University that maybe the US isn't as far behind as its global peers as we make out it to be. The Infrastructure Good for Barometer by The Economist and Duke University shows that the US is number 9 in the world out of 30 countries. Obviously not where we want to be, but not at the bottom of the pile. We still have work to do, though. So if I had a penny for the amount of times we heard deferred maintenance, down payment on infrastructure today, I think collectively we'd all have a lot of pennies. Some sectors are facing more challenges than others, and we've heard about the challenges in transit and water particularly. We also know that energy is under significant strain here in the US. We learned from David that IIJA only had $55 billion worth of investment for water, but water needs are much larger than that. So I think as we think about maybe undervalued sectors, how can we get the momentum moving there? Innovation is key to pushing through those challenges and roadblocks. So we learned that San Diego recycled its water in order to meet some of those challenges. And right here in New York City, we've seen at JFK, at LaGuardia with the MTA P3, that the home of global capital is finding a way to deploy that capital to build new infrastructure, and in ways that are somewhat foreign to US financing by looking at P3s. Complex projects are really hard, but I don't think we should undervalue the momentum that we've made in the US over previous years. You just have to look towards the Hudson River and the Gateway development to see that that mega project is being delivered, and they're doing a terrific job of it. Our friends in the UK will tell you that these complex projects are hard. HS2 is a really good example of that. Back in Australia, we've had a lot of challenges with that too, but in the US, we've been pushing forward with it. So let's take that away from today. I think the other thing, the second lesson I like to share is that we must stay focused on our communities. Our best and most successful projects include community from the outset. We learned from Uzo at JFK that infrastructure should reflect the community. The community should not have to adapt to it. The US is particularly good at engaging with community when compared to global peers. So let's build on that momentum. And that includes making sure that that engagement is embedded into projects and making sure that all citizens, including minority businesses, are involved, as we learned from Uzo at JFK. Capacity is key when we're talking about community. The the infrastructure consultancy firm has showed that we need 400,000 new engineers every year. Mayor Nuremberg showed us that how leveraging our community resources shows that investment in people pays dividends. It takes a long time. There'll be road bumps along the way, but I think, the investment in our community is key. And the Lieutenant Governor, of course, showed that out of a tragedy, we can refocus our efforts onto communities and the economies to accelerate collaboration timeframes and outcomes. And the last piece is governance isn't sexy, but it is key. So as we think about how we should be structuring our government and our policies, maybe we have an opportunity coming into the end of IIJA. I really like what Renee said about how the federal government should maybe not be at the start of every phase that we consider about governance, and maybe we need to be putting more effort and resources into municipal and state governments as well. As we learned from Alan, the UK is a great exemplar in this space, wherever Alan is. There he is, yeah. So, that 10-year infrastructure plan is a terrific example of how to build certainty in markets in order to create that investment and support our communities. At an organizational level, we learned that at the MTA, they've reoriented their governance to build a new section in order to support their $68.4 billion capital program, becoming the fifth agency of the MTA. That 5-year capital program will support 2,000 new rail cars and make sure that 90% of new work is ADA focused. As Gillian shared in the last panel here, some of the governance in the US, including some of the governance around international recognition, makes it hard for the US to be able to attract the best talent from across the globe and build out this infrastructure. And not just the speakers. As I'm talking in the room today, Michael from Infrastructure RE shared a really good point that the US maybe isn't so good at mandates, and the UK has had some really good success, including with the BIM mandate, as we heard on the last panel. But how can we maybe flip the switch on that? And Michael's suggestion was that we could look at it at a project level and look at it by embedding governance in technology and see if we could flow it up. Love that idea. As David Porter shared in the last panel, there are trade-offs, though, with any mandate. So I think, David, you asked that question as well. As we're thinking about mandates and the people that might lose out for them, how can we support them to make sure that they aren't left behind? And so, look, I think, they're the 3 lessons I wanted to share. If you're looking ahead at what we're going to do into the future, you hopefully won't be bored. Next month, Dan, who's up in the back there, will be leading a twin talk in Montreal. He's bringing together some of the leaders of Canada's new high-speed rail project, including the CEO of that consortia, Alto. So if you're in Montreal on June 9, it will be a terrific event. Liz and I will be partnering together on a white paper, and we're delivering a twin talk in DC on reframing infrastructure resilience and some new markers around that. So if you're in DC in September, please come along. And of course, Mark will be leading TIPS globally. And on that note, I will pass off to you, Mark.
Thank you, Rory. Don't worry, I'll keep this very brief, but I'll start off by saying, well, obviously you've met Anthony Unleashed. He is on tour with us and doing some of the others, so exceptional difference between sort of questions and answers that we do overseas. 2 figures then you just might want to know. 86% of the projects in the UK have BIM compared to 59% in the US. So it's not that far behind. And again, David highlighted changes in pavement. As London adopts a more electric vehicle presence, the pavement is changing. Where do you put all those charging points? Now, I've been here a couple of days, a couple of times. It's going to be very interesting if you ever try to put the charging points into New York on your pavements to keep your cars going. But with that, listen, I'd like to thank the speakers. I'd like to thank our partners. I'd also like to thank you. Hopefully you see these events are quite informal, and the reason why they're based around engagement. So we don't want to put any barriers on job titles, names, roles, or responsibilities. It's about putting you all in the room so you're able to engage with each other. As Rory says, the other tips, we are doing Melbourne, we are doing Toronto, and we're doing London this year. So if you have any overseas colleagues, please do pass on. If you want us to return, please let us know. It's down to you. This event is for you. So we need to know, well, welcome back. So do either do that by email, social media. We'd love to come back to this location. I started off the words right at the beginning with, is the magic we're looking for in the work we're avoiding? You've heard, especially the finance side, we need to change. We have to change. We need more productivity. We need better leadership in our projects, on time, on budget. But actually others might enforce that to us, finance especially. So are we ready? Are you ready? Are you willing to accept that change when it comes down the line? That's maybe something for you to ponder and think about. Can you throw up the website? So this is going to be blatantly self-promotion here, is our website. On this website, if you see there's upcoming events, there's leadership, there is a knowledge, so all our past tips are in there, our twin talks, there's about 50 to 60 hours of video. Can you just flick on down to the knowledge? So if you're at the Knowledge Hub, you'll see some great papers written by the whole team, so they're all up there for you. There's no gating, there's no collecting of data. All these tips are available for you to learn and engage with us. And if you can go to the final button, leadership. Now this is why I'm going off script and my team are going to really worry. That's my team. I would like to say today would not have happened without Dan, Rory, Fiona. So please, can I have a round of applause for them? So that is future leadership, that is collaboration, and the result is today. So thank you. I hope to see you again soon. Please enjoy and take care and stay safe.